Thank you for your kind word, Eskil. It's been a pleasure to meet you here, and thank you all for having me here. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, it's a pleasure to talk to you about hybrid warfare. It's always good to have number 3 in your presentation. It kind of like gives the idea that you've been planning on on giving you good examples. But in my case, actually, I'm not going to settle with 3. I'm going to give you a bit more than just 3 perspectives. Some time ago, I was given instructions from a colleague of mine that when presenting to military folks, make sure that you include some maps. So I thought about making it a bit better and offering you 2 maps here. Although some of you might be a bit concerned where's north and why it's in such a strange place. So as Oystein was just like mentioning, with lots of maps, like what's the importance of China, what's the importance of Strait of Malacca. Once again, I'm bringing us then again closer to our own region. And as you can see, like the world seems a bit different if you move a map around a bit. Like if we take a look from the Norwegian Sea towards the Russia, the view is quite different when it's taken from the Moscow towards the west. And of course, those of you in operational planning, most of you that have been doing that, you are aware of that when you turn the map around, it also eases up the way that you can settle yourself in the pants or in the shoes of the actor in the other end. In this case, Kremlin. How do people in the Kremlin view the world? How do they see the map? What do they see in front of them? And here we come also to the other important question, which was also brought up by Carl earlier. Regions still do matter, and we still have to do a lot of cooperation, both regionally and also regions within the nations. Those are important. And as we can see from the map taken from the Norwegian Sea perspective, is that it looks like we are fractured. We are fractured by the Baltic Sea. We are separated by the geography. But what I'm trying to claim here is that we are actually brought together by the ideologies and ideals, even though some might be arguing that their role in the world is diminishing, especially when we look from the tight realist perspective on how the world and how it's ordered. Furthermore, what I would like to present with these pictures is that this area ranging from North Sea to Arctic and then to the Black Sea, that triangle that it forms, everything that happens there bears a great significance to us all. And I think the Ukraine, for example, was a great example to us. So that region matters, and that region matters also because we have a local regional power here, namely the Russia. So, coming to Russia, there are some statistics. You always have to have also statistics in your presentation to give it more credibility. And especially if you have rising trends, the better. So what we are having here, and I think that our Norwegian friends who are driving Teslas mostly what I've seen, are happy. Rise of the rise of the production, in this case Russian production, oil production, but here is the rise of the barrel price. Oh, sorry, that's actually the rise of the foreign exchange reserves in Russia, and that's the rise of the barrel of the price. Worrisome trends, meaning that it's not only that the barrel price is growing, it's also that the production figures, that's the multiplier, what Russia is producing crude at the moment, that's rising. And then at the same time, because of the sanctions partly, and partly because of the trends, because the force by the low oil prices, there also the production cost is going down, especially here in Norway, for example. I think it was maybe from Statoil saying that at the moment with the current oil prices, Norway is already experiencing much more money flows than during the kind of like the past high prices of oil. That was just published a few days ago. So we can also imagine something analogous happening also in Russia, which means that we don't need to see the prices of, let's say, $150 per barrel or $120 per barrel for them to receive the same amount of resources that they were receiving before the 2014. So these are the trends that I think are important from the perspective. If we think that there's an intent, some sort of a malicious intent in our neighboring country, so there's also something that supports their capability development, and this is also something that will also impact on their hybrid capabilities. Second trend. This was just a slide from a briefing that I gave more or less 2 years ago. Lots of like big words and pictures and disinformation, and down MH17, including also the first news from the Syria. But here's something that I wrote there. US-led West, authority of the United States. And this is a trend that I'm a bit worried about. In addition to the filling coffers of Kremlin, is that how trustful can we be here in our corner of the world to whether the US wants to lead from the front, whether the authority of the United States is eroding to some degree. These are the questions. I don't have the answer, but when I went back to my old materials and went through kind of like categorically what we've been covering so far. So this was something that came to my mind, that whether I would still use the same words at a moment, like 1 year after change of presidents. So these two converging and to some degree paradoxical trends can somehow influence the decision makers in the Kremlin in a way that they would like to see. Maybe there's once again this kind of like window of opportunity. And here we come to the world order kind of questions. Whether they see that then now it's their time to act, and they also have the means to do it. So here we come to the hybrid warfare. Because the title of this conference is multi-domain battle, so why am I here invited to talk about hybrid warfare in this conference? Because, as the name implies, in multi-domain battle, one could easily think that covers the phase. If you think of the typical order of the phases in the operations, that actually entails the use of force, kinetic use of force. And here we come into the hybrid warfare in a sense that, or if we want to use EU safe terms, hybrid threats, that these use of these hybrid tools takes place in the shaping phase before the utilization of the kinetic force. And this is important, especially when looking from the perspective of those military budgets of the world. You're absolutely right there that Russia's budget, looking from sheer numbers, looks rather small in comparison to, let's say, if the Germany would be using 2% of their budget. But then again, it's also about on what they are putting their money. And then again, do they have wider array of tools in their possession that they are willing to utilize in order to attain their goals? So we have to think, in my opinion, that there are a wider array of tools, instruments of power, so to say, that nation states possess and can put into the use in order to attain their world order level aims, so to speak. And we know that Kremlin harbors these kinds of aims, although whether they are capable of attaining those or not, that's the different question. Some of you, especially the Cold War veterans, I could maybe see a few here, might consider that, okay, this sounds pretty much like the political warfare, like, the long telegram and cannon and NSC 68. So what's the difference here? Here we come to the point that Carl was making before. The whole society, digitalization of the society, the I wouldn't like to use the lightning speed transfer of information from one point to another. But anyway, the closeness of people, the use of big data, the profiling, the amount of data available from us, both that we openly give out, let's say, to Twitters, like Carl, for example, is a good use of Twitter, or like, for example, something that is obtained illegally, let's say Equifax hack, or hack that happened to the OPM where information tied to clearances was stolen. What if this is used in active measures campaign, in influence campaign? That's what has been changed. Like access to data, but then again, utilization of technology in the malicious purposes. What we have been seeing in the inflation campaigns across the Europe. And also, one could say that this is typical Russian way of doing things, or the old Soviet active measures campaign. That's true, but now they do have this. We in the West, our Western societies are much more vulnerable because there's much more attack vectors, and also this attack space that we can be attacked from. Like, for example, critical infrastructure. Nowadays, mostly owned by private sector companies, and also communications infrastructure owned by private sector companies, and fully digitalized. So we are more and more like our societies, digital societies. We are running on private sector infrastructure, and that's one of the things that has changed from the Cold War years, on top of the digitalization. So we were talking about the hybrid toolkit. So what are those tools available? So in this particular example, we have been using the kind of like the ranging from soft power tools to hard power tools, ranging from normal diplomacy and to the use of economic power, use of sanctions, use of in the far end, use of military force. There we enter to the multi-domain battle. There we also enter to the area where especially we coming from the smaller powers, I'm coming from Finland, and there's Swedes and Norwegians here, we have to think of what does it actually mean for us, where we, in like smaller power, we have to be able to invoke all the resources of our societies in order to be able to survive. So there we enter to these old ideas of totalförsvar, for example, in Swedish, or in Finland we are nowadays talking about comprehensive security, when we are talking about invoking all the possible resources of our society to the use in defense. One could say and argue, I've heard this argument, I think it was one of the NATO generals who was saying that the hybrid warfare is kind of like evil twin of the comprehensive security approach. I think that there's lots in common there. The thing is, for example, the publications that I've done with my colleagues and what I've been reading, quite often we are listing, there are lots of different events that have taken place. For example, Russia was harboring a coup d'etat in Montenegro, or then there were like some gas politics or special operations forces in Crimea, etc. We are always reacting to the things that were planned already 2, 3, 4 years, even more ahead in operational planning phase. So we are always trying to get hold of the past, in a sense. Here we come into the important thing of that how can we be more proactive and not to be reactive in how we tackle the threats that we are facing. So for example, if we are now seeing the influence campaign that took place in the social media during the various referendums and elections, we are reacting to something that already has happened, operation that already took place, that was planned much beforehand, that the impact was anticipated, and it was commenced, and now they're reaping the benefits. whereas we should be trying to figure out what they are up to next, what kind of tools they are planning to do the next. And that's where we come into the importance of international cooperation. Because, for example, smaller countries in a region alone, or even in the EU, cannot alone know all the patterns, all the modus operandis and patterns that are emerging from those Russian activities. We have to cooperate, we have to share information, we have to be able to understand the bigger whole. While there's lots of text here, you shouldn't be too worried about. This here is the important part. This is an upcoming piece, this is coming out now in March 2018, is that it appears to, by many serious analysts, are suggesting that the barrel price will climb up back to the $100 range. And also that will, in some markets, that will also impact the price of the natural gas, if it's tied to the price of the oil. So in case of Russia, now after the March election, after the Putin has been solidified his power again, like officially to us. So what we are going to see then, and whether there's going to be continuation of the hostilities as we have witnessed so far. And I would argue that some people are arguing that what we are going to witness is going to be that, okay, they're going to continue their military modernization programs, and we are going to see less of these hybrid means. I would say that it's going to be quite the opposite, because it's actually the military modernization, the existence of that hardcore power there gives the backing to the utilization of the more softer means. So we are going to see emboldened, resurgent Russia, seeing their opportunities abound, and they are tacticians, as we have been often witnessing. So if there is an opportunity, they try to grasp it. So once their military is even better shape, with the amount of money flowing back to the coffers, I would say that we are going to see much more confident Russia. And then again, filling coffers also allows Russia to buy the support from the population when they can start replenishing the reserve funds that they've been depleting during the past few years. As it was already discussed in the previous presenters, so what we are, of course, here in this part of the world, close to the Arctic Circle, we are seeing the mortal threat being Russia. But at the same time, it's of key importance to see beyond Russia. There's only one country in between anyway, to go and to see China and Chinese activities. For example, during the past summer, we saw Russian Navy and Chinese Navy together in the Baltic Sea. Quite an interesting sight. We are seeing Chinese trains arriving to places in Finland as the far end of their Silk Roads. Also in Britain, the same thing. So many of the things can be tied to their economic development, but at the same time, it's also development of their power and their grasp in a region. And we've also in Finland, we've been witnessing the panda diplomacy. We just welcomed 2 pandas to one of our zoos. And often with these authoritarian states, in this day, namely Russia and China, we aren't talking about soft power in a way like liberal democracies. We are applying it. So we are trying to create this kind of so invite the other countries to take on our set of values, our way of living. But we are talking about sharp power. That's something that has come across in the media lately, about like utilizing something resembling our soft power, but at the same time there being these authoritarian undertones underneath. It sounds very bleak, I know. gloom and doom, once again, alarmist talk. But I would like to actually end in a positive note. So even though 2 years ago, like in that briefing that I gave, I was suggesting that, now we really need to start doing something. That it's important that we have to do something else than just like report on things that's ongoing, because that's already too late. We need to be more proactive in the game. And now we are starting to see some positive signals. Here what I've collected is that, for example, that one individual piece of legislation published by the BBC. We've seen similar kind of development also back home in Finland, for example, because of the events that started to unfold from the Crimea 2014 annexation of Crimea and war in eastern Ukraine. We've seen plenty of different, first of all, vulnerability surveys, trying to see what are the vulnerabilities existing in our system, in our governing system, and then actually starting to act on those, not just telling that we have this system of comprehensive security and it worked for us during the Cold War years, so it will work now as well, but actually actively changing, for example, the mandate of the different security services, trying to enable our intelligence services with suitable legislation, giving new mandate for armed forces as part of like responding to the greater threat. So it's not just enough to identify the vulnerabilities in our system, but we also have to act and act decisively. And also, we see some structures, international cooperative structures emerging. One of the examples being the hybrid COE established in Helsinki, where it offers this kind of a shared space for NATO and EU to cooperate on this topic. And it's been now ongoing for officially since the September, and it's been publishing interesting reports. So I really suggest that you also go and check it out if you haven't already. So there are things going on, and we are applying some of the antidotes. But at the same time, these worrisome trends, which are related to the world order in change, and then again, what are like the powers, economic powers that are now in shifting. So are we acting quickly enough in order to be able to respond to the challenges that we might be facing in the near future? In the further away, there's definitely China coming, and that's something that we need to also work on. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Air Force Academy, I want to thank you for interesting brief and thank you for enlightening about hybrid warfare. There's some Norwegian chocolate and a book about Eronen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.